Welcome.
Hello, I just had one question for reasons I do not feel ready to talk about yet. How do we deal with the suicide of a loved one?
Thank you for the question. And I would say that you've asked the right person because in 2017, October, the unfortunate experience of losing my older brother did happen. When he took his life that day, he took a part of my life with him. So I'm sure a lot of you that have clicked on this video can then relate. So I'm going to talk about this video in stages because I want to have a format. Otherwise, I'll get lost in my own words. There's obviously a lot to say on this subject, and I'm not sure where to begin. I'm not even sure if this will be the first video. So let's begin with the initial shock that I felt when I was informed that although they did pump my older brother's stomach, he wasn't able to make it. Let's start there. So I basically collapsed. My uncle grabbed me, and yeah, I started screaming, "pendejo," in Spanish, which is stupid, because I just felt like it was stupid. We didn't know how much we loved you, right? That's the initial thought process. And I would say that that's not even the worst part, because I still didn't believe. And that's something we will all go through, or even in other cases, right? Not necessarily suicide, because you don't believe that they are dead. I would say that's the first reaction that we all have. And so if you're going through this right now, I want to tell you that although you might feel numb and you might not have much energy to look past through the tunnel to the light on the other side, that realization is the hardest part, that they have indeed died physically. And of course, you may have a lot of questions and a lot of confusion. And like I said, you may be considered feeling something like being dead inside. But you know what can make this process even more difficult? Is to feel the need to keep it all to yourself. And so that's why I've created this channel. I want to be able to openly talk about sadness, experiences, and healing. We are not sad people. We are simply people who have had a sad experience is all. We are in our essence is a wonderful, beautiful person who all deserve to be happy. Now, I've wrote down some of the reasons why I reserved myself from telling anyone at school. I did tell one person, which ended up only being my friend for the first week when I came back to school. I guess I just didn't want to deal with my seriousness. So my reason was, and it may be yours, so I put we. We fear our loved one was far too dear, and people have silly ideas about hell and why suicide should be a damned act or a condemned act. And I wrote down that I don't think that's what we want to hear, so we find it easier to keep it within our circles. Not to mention, we may also feel people will judge our loved one or even ourselves, and that will be difficult to face. And that really was difficult to face for me. So let me talk about a situation that I had. Obviously, any details that I give you will be very vague because if you want me to go in depth, you can request in the comments below, and I can go in more details about certain experiences. But this will just be a vague little. So, coming back to school, I guess it could be the first 2 months coming back to school. I'm obviously still going through a lot of pain. And what happened is somehow this girl had found out that I was following me around school before that. Um, and I just didn't have the energy to tell her to get away. Um, she didn't have the best reputation, and she was making me look almost like we were dating, but somehow I ended up having enough energy to tell her once I found out that the reason that everyone that was on my bus and people around the bus stop found out about my brother's suicide, you could say, was because of her. She had asked a lot of questions and she got the answers, which is something I didn't expect the teachers to do. I specifically said I didn't want anyone to know, but I guess there isn't much you could do about that. Oh. I told her I got angry. I told her off. I told her, get away from me. I don't want to see you anymore. Ever since then, I just imagined that people would laugh at it, and I didn't want them to. And people did start to laugh. People did start to use it as a way to bully me, especially in my Play-Doh class, which is a class I had to take to catch up on all my work that I didn't do for the months that I was gone grieving at home. And so that was very unfortunate, and it ended up coming into a fist fight, which I could mention later as well. Because some kid said, could you let me borrow your earphones? And yeah, I did. And he didn't want to give them back, so. So as you can tell, school was very rough for me. And so that's exactly why I wanted to reserve myself from telling anybody. But in a way that made it much more difficult because people saw that I was sad. They saw that I was serious, but just didn't know why. And there was nothing I could say about it because I didn't want anyone to know. So. And then obviously they were asking why you were gone so long. There wasn't much I could do about that. But I just feel like that made it a lot more difficult. I wish I would have opened up more. I wish I would have admitted to myself that I was sad. Going to the restroom and crying there, having kids walk into the restroom, it's an awkward experience. It wasn't enough for me. So I also wrote down here that, not to mention, we may also feel people would judge our loved one or even ourselves, and that will be difficult to face. So I felt like they would call my brother a coward, because some people do have an idea, as if they have a choice, right? Which obviously the people who commit suicide, they no longer have a choice at that point. They are taken over by pain and sadness. So I don't consider that they did it. I consider that it's just something that took over, right? Possessed their minds. So for whatever reason we may reserve ourselves, no, none of it is your fault. And anyone else's reaction is simply because they don't know what it's like to lose someone to suicide. Now, this perspective I obviously didn't come to while I was in school, but it was once I graduated and started to reflect that I started to forgive a lot of the kids who did laugh and did make my grieving process more difficult. So I like that perspective I have now, that if I didn't know about what it's like to lose someone to suicide, I might have done the same thing. Maybe not. So then I want to talk about now is about the initial guilt that obviously it came within the first 3 days for me. After the third day, the guilt was killing me. You get thoughts like I could have saved them if only I did this or did that different. If I only hugged them that last day, if I only told them this, only I received their words differently, right? But the reality is you don't know that. And so, in order to strengthen this idea that I've just brought here, is that I don't even know if the story is real or not. What my sister told me is that she said, once they are decided, there's really no way that you can help them. Because trust me, I did try to help them the last 2 weeks. I tried to help him. Anyways, so there's a man who is suicidal, and they say they put him in a straitjacket. And he somehow managed to get the pin that holds the straitjacket together and committed suicide that way. So that just tells you that even putting them in a straitjacket might have not saved them, because suppose you did save them and did find out what they were onto. But then one day when you weren't home, one day when your guard was off, it happened then, and I feel like that would have felt even worse. Okay. So once you have like the guilt, which I want to mention, of course, is that you didn't have a choice either. Just like they didn't have a choice when they did that. You didn't have a choice when you argued, when you said those harmful words. You didn't know any better. You acted out of your present level of consciousness at that time. And who you are now is a much more intelligent and an evolved person. So drop guilt. Forgive yourself. It's okay. I know that the person that you are now would not have said any of those things, or you understand. So for me personally, I felt like this journey was very lonely. I felt like there was nothing and anything that could really help me. And so I want to share this powerful quote with you. If you can't find a way, create one. So for me, what happened after the initial guilt and the shock was despair, deep sadness. This, I felt, lasted longer than any other stage. It lasted months. Actually, it lasted a year and a half. My smiles and my laughs, they felt fake, because the despair was still surrounding and polluting everything. And so, even after 3 years of experience, the sadness to that day, it still comes. Like, not everyone wants to feel their emotional energy, so they put this wall around themselves, so that's why it'll seem like other people move on faster than you. But the reality is they're faking themselves. They're tricking themselves, and that's why I say don't judge yourself and don't rush the process. This will take a while. Sadness episodes, they will come, and they will continue to come even 10 years after, but what is going to change is your reaction to them, especially after you're listening to this audio, which I'm going to share some perspectives and things you can do when the episodes do come. So it's a coping method to put this wall around your heart, and people start to reserve themselves a lot more because it's easier. And just because you are brave enough to open this wall doesn't mean you should rush yourself out of your feelings. Feel grief for as long as necessary. The reality is, with suicide deaths, the pain and even the guilt and the anger will continue to return. And that's okay. That's a natural process of grief. So I feel like after the despair and the sadness is when you start to accept, and the death actually slowly enters you. But you still hold on to something, which, like I've said, is the anger. You turn to anger now because anger feels more powerful than sadness. So it's a way of bringing yourselves up a level. It's like when you're in your lowest point, people always turn to anger because it slightly rises them at least one level up. But in a way, that's just another layer of pain. Another common thought that I had in my head was, why wasn't I enough for him? Why weren't we enough, right? But the reality is, it isn't about whether you were enough or not. It's just a simple fact that we were not sponsored by love at that time. That's why I feel like ever since that experience, I started to cherish my relationships a lot more. I started to realize that people could be here one day and they might not be here the next. And it's only through this intense suffering that I started to realize that death is real. Even when my grandma passed away, I didn't feel like death was real. I still doubted it in my head, and we all do. So I feel like suicide kind of puts it in your face and makes you look at death, which is what you should do. Don't move into thinking. If you simply feel, if you face the emotions and the episodes that come up. So I'm gonna talk about now of like my deepest sadness and how I got out of it, and we're gonna start to talk about what we can do to expel this emotional energy. So it was one day when I was just looking at this picture and I started to play sad music, which was a trigger. It obviously triggered memories. And I just collapsed onto the bed and started crying and screaming. I really felt like I wanted to end my life as well. But then I fully gave myself into the crying. And I just started to focus on my breath. And I felt peace. I felt like he was there. It was real for me. It's almost as though I looked through death and saw the futility of it. And that's really what happened. And it's really what's going to happen when you stare at the emotions. You see, most people like to run away, right? Now, I did the thing that society hasn't conditioned us to do. Because I know death has occurred. Your beloved is dead. Don't move in thinking. Don't do anything at all. Don't look into religion. Don't look into anything. Just look into yourself. Face the death. Be present with the death. Feel your own death. Because if you just continue to feel, you will ignite the light within you, the eternal fire that expels all darkness. All you need is a little courage, and I'm here to give you that bit of courage you need to be able to discover and actually become friends with these emotions that come up. If it's pain, it's there for a reason. If you just but let it, it becomes a healing process. You feel your emotions. You don't go and eat cereal. You don't go and watch TV. It's gonna be uncomfortable at first. And you might even get sad again. But then that sadness is gonna pour out. And all that will be left is peace. Go ahead and give this a try. Take a few deep breaths as well before you begin. Do you feel anything coming up? You will. There may be thoughts there, but just let the thoughts go like clouds in the sky. Don't worry about them. Like visitors, they come in, then they go. You simply stay centered within your emotional field and feel. Tears may want to come, let them come. You might even feel a subtle peace in the background. And you will do this every single time that you find yourself lost from now on. And if needed, you will come back to this exact video.